everybody. Thanks to those of you that are watching me live on Facebook Live. Thanks to those of you that are listening to the broadcast. Welcome to FlashChat. This time we're going to be talking about The Flash, Season 6, Episode 14, Death of the SpeedForce. Okay? And I do FlashChat in lieu of a written review because I'm going to give you my thoughts on the episode and I'm going to give you what I think is going on, and then I pose a series of 12 questions during the hour, one question every 5 minutes, and then I give you my thoughts on the question I posed, and then I read your answers and shout you out on your tweets, okay? So I actually put up an advertising for FlashChat on Twitter, and I got a response to that. This is from Michael Child TV, and Michael says, this whole Thawne Wells arc makes no sense when Thawne was never really Wells from season 1. And if they say all the doppelgangers combined after Crisis and there are no more doppelgangers, then how does Tyler Hoechlin and Brandon Routh Superman still exist? And my answer to that question is, I am not sure. You pose some very good points. It's possible that since they were paragons, they were outside of the time stream. Possible. I also think that Thawne was outside of time as well. Okay? Because those are some very good points. That how, if the doppelgangers would have died by now, or if they were all combined, or whatever it was that Cisco says in this episode, if that's the case, how is Thawne back, and how does Kingdom Come Superman, that's Brandon Routh Superman? Remember that Brandon Routh Superman was actually Chris Reeve Superman from that era. So Brandon Routh is playing a continuation of the Chris Reeve era Superman. How are they there if all the doppelgangers were collapsed? Because remember, his body got taken over by Lex Luthor, but then when Oliver restored the universe, Brandon Routh Superman was back. And so was Tyler Hoechlin, except he had an extra child that he didn't have before. So you know, we just have to face the fact that there aren't really any hard, really any hard and fast rules to this whole multiverse thing, and it wasn't ever really a situation where everything was, laid out and explained linearly in terms of all the changes that were made, and there are no uniform rules about who was kept and who left and who got brought back during Crisis. I mean, we wish that there was, but there's nothing uniform going on here, I'm sad to say. Okay. Rules of FlashChat. I will read those right quick. If you're on live, you can jump on the Twitter stream with me right now live and answer the questions. My Twitter is DT2 Comics Chat. DT2 Comics Chat. That's my Twitter. Jump on there right now live, and you can answer these questions in real time as I read them off. Okay? All right. So let's look at question number 1. Question number 1 is, how did you feel overall about Wally returning? Think it's a good thing? Now, after watching the episode, what I can say is, because there's some questions I deal with how Wally behaves later, but basically what I want to say is, it was good to have Wally back, but it felt like a bit of a shoehorned character, a bit of a shoehorned episode, because he just shows up out of nowhere with no warning, and then a bunch of different things happen in the episode, which we'll get into, and then by episode's end, he's gone again. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't feel like there's a heavy flow of continuity. They don't respond like regular people would respond in relationships. Maybe Team Flash is a bit used to people being transitory. That makes a little bit of sense. But Wally just kind of shows up out of nowhere and does all this stuff and then disappears back into nowhere. So it just felt just a little bit shoehorned and not really as organic as it should have been for Joe's son to be back in town and Barry's brother to be back in town. And then we know what's up with Iris. We're going to talk about that too. So, you know, at least they gave him a power glow up. At least he was able to do that spectacular helicopter rescue in the beginning, because before he might not have had that kind of mastery over his power. So at least he's grown. We'll give him that. Okay? So again, question one, how did you feel overall about Wally returning? Think it's a good thing. So let me read your answers. Chris Kofer fan says, in my opinion, was a good thing. Polly, P_Makor says, I love to see Wally back. Some parts of the show were a bit off or odd with me, but I love to see Kid Flash back on my screen. And to that, I'm going to say, it really seemed like a bit of a shoehorn, because he comes in out of nowhere and they all kind of roll with it. But again, in all fairness, maybe Team Flash at this point is used to having people coming in and out of Star Labs, in and out of their lives, because maybe that's just the nature of their life as Team Flash. So maybe I can cut the characters a little slack with that in story. Maybe. But as an audience member, it still feels very much like he comes out of nowhere and all this stuff happens. And, you know, I don't know. Most of the time when people have been gone for a while, they have to, I don't know, they have to get reacquainted. They have to kind of get their groove back on. They got to do something more than just show up, you know, here I am, and we just jump in like, you know, nothing ever happened. You know, maybe that's just me. That's just the way it feels to me. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. Question number 2 is, Iris mentions the lightning rod concept, and this truly amazes me, that Barry still can't feel or hear his real wife. Why do you think that is? Now, let me explain what the lightning rod concept is. First of all, that is not a Barry and Iris trope. That's not their trademark. That actually is Wally and Linda. Wally West is married to Linda Park in the comics, has been since the 90s. And when Wally West was blinked out of existence at the end of, it was either Dead Heat or Terminal Velocity, I forget which one. Another Flash from the future came back in his past, and long story short, Wally had to find his way back to his time and space. And he said what helped him find his way back to his own universe was Linda, his wife, that his wife was his lightning rod, that her presence was the thing that Wally could key in on no matter where he was and find his way back to her. That's where the lightning rod, because Wally called Linda his lightning rod. They stole that from them, and now they're trying to apply it to Barry and Iris, but that was never a thing Barry said to Iris, and that certainly doesn't apply to this Barry and Iris as far as I'm concerned on the TV show. But that's just me, because they don't have that kind of thing. She's not his lightning rod, she's not his anchor, she's not his anything. It's more of an Anakin and Padme thing. The show wants us to believe that they're in love because they keep saying that they are, but there's very little on-screen evidence and in their relationship to make any of that be true, as far as I'm concerned. Okay? So again, question 2 is, Iris mentions the lightning rod concept, and this truly amazes me that Barry still can't feel or hear his real wife. Why do you think that is? So if Barry really could sense and find, for those of you that aren't watching me, I'm saying find with some big old air quotes. If Barry cannot actually find his true love, even though she's in the mirror dimension, he ought to be able to sense, based on the lightning rod concept, that Barry could find her anywhere in any universe. He ought to be able to sense that actual Iris is somewhere else, and what he's dealing with is not real Iris. Why? Why can't he sense that? Why can't he feel or hear that? Okay, that's the question. Chris Kofer fan says, I have no idea. Polly says, big time speculation here. But maybe with the SpeedForce dying, that connection is gone, and now he has to figure out how to be human without his capability. I'm not sure. I'm not getting into shipping here, but maybe Iris is his hero girlfriend, the one you always save. And to that, I'm going to say, remember that the show stole the lightning rod from Wally and Linda. Wally could find Linda anywhere in the universe. So that's why, if they're going to appropriate it, Barry ought to be able to do that as well with Iris. But he can't. Okay, so again, my answer is, remember the show stole the lightning rod from Wally and Linda. Wally could find Linda anywhere in the universe, so that's why if they're going to appropriate, Barry ought to be able to do that as well with Iris. Appropriate it. Barry ought to be able to do that with Iris. But he can't. He can't because she's not the love of his life. She's not his lightning rod. She's not what grounds him. She's not what draws him back to the universe. Okay? That's just what they keep saying. The show keeps trying to sell you on that concept, but it's clearly not true. If you living with this woman, sleeping with this woman, talking with this woman, having breakfast with this woman, and you can't tell that ain't her, and your lightning rod senses your whatever, can't zoom in on the fact that your wife is actually somewhere else, not buying it. Not buying it even a little bit. Not buying it. Okay, Mauricio in La Realidad Nuoso says, when you do not develop a character, it is difficult for that character to have characteristics that make her distinguishable from another version of herself. In this story, Barry is not to blame for anything. I'm going to say to that, oh, wow. That's an interesting take, saying that the mirror Iris is actually so inconsequentially different from real Iris that no one could tell the difference anyway. Again, wow. And yes, ouch. So Mauricio is saying that it is Iris's underdevelopment as a character that is now feeding into the fact that her being different, I'm putting different in air quotes, her being different, is it significant enough for anybody to tell that's not really Iris? And that fact is discovered later in this episode. We're going to get into that. But it's discovered because of technology, not because of any type of distinct personality differences or whatever. Maybe little hints thereof, but nothing so significant until anybody's been able to figure it out definitively at this point. Okay? Michael Child TV says, not to mention that Cecile can't seem to notice fake Iris despite her great mind-reading power. And I'm going to say, oh my goodness, I have been saying this for weeks. How in the world does Miss Convenient Telepathy not sense anything coming off of fake Iris? Unbelievable. Okay, Michael Chow was right. That is an excellent point, and it's a point that I've been making for weeks. It's the same problem you have with having Martian Manhunter, Jean Jones, on the Justice League or in any type of situation when you have a mind reader. Okay? Now, Cecile is more of an empath, where she seems to be able to read our strong emotions, but sometimes she can read the thoughts behind those emotions as well. John is a full telepath, Jean Grey is a full telepath, Emma Frost is a full telepath, and so when you have characters like that, it's a little bit more difficult to pull off certain things when you have a fully developed mind reader, a fully developed telepath in the mix, because how could they not sense what is going on? They found a workaround for that in the movie Push. The movie Push with Chris Evans and Dakota Fanning, basically they had a metahuman that would help you forget a certain amount of your memory. And so he made everybody forget, and he wrote down their instructions so they wouldn't know until a few seconds before they were supposed to do it. And then he wouldn't know what was going on, so they couldn't track him by reading his thoughts. So that was a pretty clever workaround for when you do have telepaths in the mix. But here, Cecile's powers are always convenient, and they just show up really strongly whenever the plot needs them. But she's been around Iris for weeks now, and how come she can't notice? Because fake Iris is always nervous. She's got an even quicker temper. She snaps on people more, a whole bunch of things. But how can Cecile not pick up anything off of her? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I agree with what Michael Child's been saying. I've been saying it for weeks myself, that it makes absolutely no sense to have this convenient telepathy. Fabiola Sejku says writing, that's all. Yeah. Yeah, but Michael Chow is right. I agree with him. It's just, doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's move forward to question 3. Question 3 is, I sure wish they'd make up their minds as to whether the Speed Force is magic or science. What's your headcanon explanation as to what the Speed Force is? Now, one of the things that the show has done with its in-show mythology is shown that the Speed Force here is a little bit more like the Q continuum in Star Trek. Like, it's made up of beings, but it's made up of a collective hive mind, but they have emotions, and they can sense things, and they can feel things, and they have enough power to alter a lot of things, but it's not clear if it's magic or science. And that's the same thing going on here, that the Speed Force seems to be both an all-powerful elemental primal force of life, like other energies, like, land, sea, air, elemental energy. But also it's clearly very, very personal, because whenever it shows up to Barry, it shows up to him in the form of his mom. So I'm saying to myself, when the Speed Force comes to Wally, who does it show up, to Wally as? Or when it goes to Jay Garrick? Or, when it was going to Jesse Quick? Or, does everybody have that? Does Zoom have that? Was his speed purely from Velocity X, or was Velocity X allowing him to tap into the Speed Force at greater levels? And if it did Zoom have a visitor from the Speed Force, a personification of the Speed Force to him? Now we know that Thawne made his own Speed Force, and we'll get into that later. But I'm saying, is this specific to Barry? But it's not all science. It seems to be magic too, and it seems to be personal. It seems to be some mystical elements, but it's nebulous. We can't ever make heads or tails of it. Is it a dimension? It just keeps changing, again, based on whatever the plot needs it to be. So again, question 3 is, I sure wish they'd make up their minds as to whether the Speed Force is magic or science. What's your headcanon explanation as to what the Speed Force is? So let me read your answers. Greg says, the Speed Force is science. It is a non-sentient force of existence. That's right, non-sentient. And I'm like, maybe in the comics, but not here. It's always very personal and emotional with Barry. It's so nebulous and inconsistent in its presentation. That's the thing. Because it is indeed very nebulous and very inconsistent with its presentation in terms of what in the world is it. Fabiola says they played with it based on their interests. It shouldn't be magic, as this show has based its main idea on science by achieving the impossible. If that's magic, what's the point of having a great group of engineers and a forensic scientist at this Barry, Cisco, Caitlin? And I'm going to actually give them a clap. I'm going to give Fabiola a clap on that, because that is so well said. I could not say that any better. What is the point of having such a great group of scientists with so many different areas of expertise, and the whole basis of the show being that Barry is the impossible? That's a scientific frame, because if you're dealing with magic, nothing's impossible with magic as a concept. But this is about science. And Barry says in the pilot, I'm going to need you to believe in the impossible. Okay? All right. Chris Gopher fan says, my headcanon is a bit of both. Polly says, they seem to teeter on the edge of magic and science. Personally, I always thought it was a science, and the SpeedForce was going to look like the Matrix, just no binary. I'm weird. I still feel more science than magic, although the show doesn't help the debate. And I'm going to say, I hear you, but how does that account for Barry's personal visitations? Visitations, can I spell? From his mom. And does the SpeedForce visit Wally like that? Jay Garrett? Jesse? Okay, again, I want to see it have those personal visitations, that personal connection with the other speedsters the way it does with Barry. Or is it unique to Barry? Okay, that needs to be explained. Angry Old Saint Nick Andres 13 says the SpeedForce is the quantum field for momentum itself. And I'm going to say, maybe in the comics. Not so much here. Because maybe in the comics that's true. Okay, an unofficial Hugo Book Club blog, Hugo_book_club says, the SpeedForce isn't magic or science, it just is. And to that I'm going to say, well, isn't that convenient? Isn't that convenient? One of the main elements of the show with absolutely no explanation needed. Okay? I'm going to type that to one of the fundamental elements of the show, and it has no explanation, boundaries, or parameters. So convenient, okay? Dwayne, a.k.a. General Grudge says, the SpeedForce name is the only explanation needed. Going too deep into it is a mistake. And I'm going to say, that's not the audience's fault. They keep featuring the SpeedForce as a key player with no explanation as to how it's a player. And now they're saying it's dead. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm going to deal with that in a minute because that's one of the questions. But I just find that unbelievable. Okay? Okay. Rover223 says, I leave that to the top Flash writers of the last 40 years. I was never a Flash collector, but I'm inclined to go with the scientific explanation. And to that I'm going to say, SpeedForce is around 30 years old as a concept. It was introduced during Mark Waid's run with Wally West as Flash. Okay, Patrick Sharp says, on the show it's 100% magic. In the comics, it's science, but also kind of magic. And I'm going to say, at this point,
Hey
Hey there everyone, David Taylor 2 here. I am so excited about the launch of the Nephilim Wars. This comic is a part of my War in Heaven series, which includes novels, coloring books, and an RPG. Nephilim are half-human, half-angel hybrids, where their dads are from heaven, but their moms are from Earth. My comic, The Nephilim Wars, is set at the end of the 30th century, and the Nephilim are breeding again, and not just humans. Yikes! The humans already went to war with the angels once before when they found out that children were being born that were different. That first war was ugly, and the whole planet changed. Will they risk war again? The first comic of the Nephilim Wars will be a mini-comic published online for free. One new page will publish every Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you enjoy this comic, you can get some exclusive content from it on Patreon. For a $2 pledge, which is only about 7 cents a day, you get exclusive black and white versions of the cover and the comic pages available only on Patreon, a black and white PDF of the finished mini-comic. For a $5 pledge, which is only about 17 cents a day, you get all of the above plus a pre-release view of all the color pages. For a $10 pledge, which is only 33 cents a day, you get all of the above plus a color PDF of the finished mini-comic and a chance to actually cameo in the comic when you sign an image release. If we can reach the first goal of $2,500, we can get the full color 24-page comic produced. Woohoo! Remember, you get a bunch of exclusive stuff on Patreon that you can't find anywhere else. The Nephilim Wars have started. You'll want to know what happens next. Check back here every Friday to find out. You have to concede it is more magic than science on the show. No question, because we do. We really do. Okay. Twilight's Inferno for Oliver. Twilight's Infern says, for me it's a mix of both. It's not magic, but it's a sentient energy within the universe. It's like a human. There's science to explain our bodies and how it works, but there's also a human consciousness that's beyond silence. So Caitlin is an expert in how the SpeedForce works with the biology of the human body and the science of it, but speedsters themselves are more attuned to the sentient consciousness side of the SpeedForce. To me, it's almost like, to everyone else, the SpeedForce is a science, but to speedsters, it's almost a religion. And to that, I'm going to give her a hand clap, because that is so well said. That's a great explanation, actually. Probably the best one I've heard. So I got to give her a hand clap gif on that one. Let me read that answer again, because I thought that answer was incredible. Twilight's Infern says, if this tweet would go ahead and post, anytime today you want to post there, big guy. For me, it's a mix of both. It's not magic, but it's a sentient energy within the universe. It's like a human. There's science to explain our bodies and how it works, but there's also a human consciousness that's beyond science. So Caitlin is an expert in how the SpeedForce works with the biology of the human body and the science of it, but speedsters themselves are more attuned to the sentient consciousness side of the SpeedForce. To me, it's almost like everyone else. The SpeedForce is a science, but the speedsters, it's almost a religion. That's one of my questions I actually bring up. Science and religion real soon here, but that, fantastic answer. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'm trying to see if any other answers to that question. Okay. All right, that was question 3. All right, question 4. Removing kinetic energy would seem like a decelerant. Wouldn't Turtle need to be accelerating them to make them age so fast? I brought that up because I don't know if I buy the scientific explanation in show for how removing the kinetic energy makes them super age. Because if you take the energy away, then it looks like they would slow down, but they accelerate, the cells age faster, which doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm sure somebody's going to explain it in a way that it just seems counterintuitive what they're trying to say. So maybe I just missed the full scientific explanation of the turtle. Probably because when the turtle first appeared, I don't know if I necessarily bought their meta powers. Were they stopping time? Were they moving between the ticks of time? Were they making everything around them slow down? Or, if they were making everything around them slow down in a concentrated area, in a limited area, okay. But that's not what Turtle 2 is doing. She's actually removing energy. And if you notice in her scenes, except for the people she's focusing on, they're still moving in real time, or they're still moving in the same time she's in. Everybody else around them is frozen. So I'm trying to understand exactly the range and the impact and the boundaries of those powers, because again, they seem very inconsistent to me. So let me hear what you guys have to say. Again, removing kinetic energy would seem like a decelerant. Wouldn't Turtle need to be accelerating them to make them age so fast? Fabiola says reasoning, a thing this show has lost for a while now. Okay, and I'm going to have to give them a couple laugh out loud emojis because that's hilarious. Michael Child TV says, so many villains are either now alive again or rebooted as someone completely else. If that's the case, can they bring back Captain Cold? Then I miss that guy. And I'm like, that's what everybody is wishing for. If they're going to bring someone back, it needs to be Snart, and then he needs to hook up with White Canary. Okay. Chris Cofer fan says that's a good point. Polly says this bothered me so hard I was almost squirming. If you're going to make a world, you need your characters to make sense. At first I thought her name was Turtle as a joke. Like I had a three-legged turtle named Speedy. It would be fast-forwarding through time. And Tim Parton Trindale says, it could be the aging thing as a reverse power, like she slows everyone as their main power. My biggest problem was how quickly, easily, and many of those bubbles she's able to generate and throw around. And why didn't they just inject her instead of giving that shot to Joe? And I'm going to say, the science of it makes no sense. Again, she's supposedly removing energy, which would make anything slow down, not super age. So, like I said, I just don't get it. Nick Andres 13 Angirl St. Nick says, I think the idea is that she's leaching potential kinetic energy to age them. Science in the Flash is always terrible. And I'm like, that still wouldn't make your cells super age. It would slow them down. You'd age perhaps, but not 60 years in a moment of time. I'll say 70 years. Science of it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, that was question 4. Let's move on to question 5. Question 5, it says, was it just me, or were they talking openly at the CC Jitters crime scene? Team Flash business with other people there, because they were just, when I say they, I mean Joe, Cisco, Barry, and Wally. We're all talking out in the open about things that the Speedsters had done while in costume, and the powers of Turtle 2, and it was just, really an open discussion about everything they did in costume as well as out of costume. And why didn't anybody question Joe's son being at the crime scene? Do cops get to take their children to crime scenes? Is that a regular police procedure thing. Now, I know he's the chief of police, so maybe nobody would question him, but that is also kind of bizarre, especially since Joe is so much of a kind of the, by the book kind of guy, except when it comes to his kids, because Joe West has always bent, broken, thrown out the rules for Barry, Wally, and Iris. And yes, Barry married his sister, and yes, I'm not going to let that go. Fabiolo says, answer this, who knows that Barry is the Flash? Chris Colfer fan says, in my opinion, it was not just you. Polly says, wasn't just you. They do this a lot just because Joe and Barry are in one place at the same time instead of at his office or even Star Labs. If they don't know he's the Flash, they should know by now with all the open conversation about it. Trentdale, Tim Parton says, I've come to figure out at NCW shows they can talk about anything secret identity-wise and no one will ever know. I can see that guy from Jurassic Park standing there screaming, Barry Allen is the Flash. See, no one cares. Okay. Got to give him a few laugh emojis on that. And I'm going to say to Polly, it has now surpassed Superman as the world's worst kept identity. World's worst kept secret identity, because who either doesn't know that Barry Allen is the Flash, or whenever they see the Star Labs crew together with Joe, how can they not notice that when they see them all powered up and costumed up, it's the same people? If Caitlin, Cisco, Barry, and Wally are on a crime scene with Joe, and then Team Flash and their powers and their costumes are somewhere downtown fighting crime, and Joe's there too, how can people not see that that's the exact same people with masks and costumes on? How? Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Okay? All right. That was question 5. Here we go with question 6. Kind of amazing how Wally, who apparently now is a Zen master, didn't pick up on the vibrational frequencies of Iris being from another dimension. Now I know at the end of the episode, Wally mentions to Joe, take care of Iris for me, there's something different about her. That sounded, however, more intuitive, brother to sister. What I'm talking about is Wally clearly has a different level of speed powers and a different level of mastery of those powers. Yeah, no. Of course my phone would ring while I'm doing FlashChat. So a different level of powers and a different level of mastery of those powers. But how come he can't see? A speedster can sense vibrational frequencies. That's how they can phase to put their hands or their bodies through anything. See that? See my little super speed hand going? So speedsters can phase because they have molecular control, but that's because they can sense the vibrational frequencies of the molecules of their body and also the molecules of what they're trying to phase through, or else they can never phase through it. Like if that thing is vibrating at 200 vibrations per second, then they know what they have to match to get their molecules through it, that kind of thing. So since Mirror Iris cannot possibly be vibrating with the same kind of frequencies that real Iris could be, Barry should be able to sense it. But since Wally has demonstrated all these Zen-based higher level of awareness kind of thinking and clearly a marked increase in his powers, how come? Because, Mirror Iris's identity is revealed later with technology. Knowing the world, based on what we've seen of Wally in this episode, he should have been able to sense that as a speedster, not as a brother. The brother is the emotionally intuitive part, but as a speedster, no way. No way. He should have missed that. Let me read your answers. Terrence Robinson, TJ Future CPA, says, so how much of a mirror is Mirror Iris? Is she mirror enough not to get recognized by all the conventional Flash means? And I'm going to say speedsters have a keen sense of vibrational frequencies It's how they match them to phase through objects. Irises mirror irises vibrations, should be screaming at them for their differences, because they should be. Especially Barry and Wally, the speedsters. But more than Barry or Joe, he did notice something was extremely wrong. That's something at least. And I'm going to say, no, that's brother to sister. That's emotional and intuitive. As a speedster, Wally can sense vibrational frequencies. It's how speedsters phase. So there's no way that mirror irises frequencies aren't screaming at him. Just no way. Fabiolo says he was worried or Iris at the end, but by pointing this out, you just exposed one issue that the show has with its own characters having consistency. We sense that at the end as a brother, intuitive, as a speedster, her non-human vibrational frequencies should be screaming at him. And I'm going to say, especially since Wally is now more in tune through his Zen training. Okay. Emperor Maruda, Rob_Kroll says at least he was the only one who felt that something is wrong, but just thinks she's overworked. Maybe. Okay. Okay, let me see. Okay, all right. That was question 6. We're going to move on to question 7. I knew Wally was going to get preaching. I knew this was going to be another blame Barry episode. I still maintain that Barry is right. The SpeedForce can't die. Do you agree with that? My understanding of the SpeedForce is it's a force. You know, does wind die? Does water die? You know, does lightning die? Does any of that die? Is it possible? It seems to be concentrated forms of elemental energy, which doesn't seem to be able to die. But here, they're trying to make us believe that it could die. I don't buy it. It doesn't make any sense. But again, it goes back to my earlier question is, are we talking about magic or science or both? And if the SpeedForce is some type of sentient form, that would seem to then indicate that it was at some point born. When and how was the SpeedForce born? And if it has the ability to die, how is it maintained? Is it self-sustaining? Is it its own power source? How? Because non-sentient power sources of energy seem to be able to sustain themselves, but anything that's living or sentient seems to have to eat. But plants are also non-sentient, but they have to eat too. So what does the SpeedForce eat? What feeds it? Just so many questions that I wish were addressed on the show. So let me hear what you say. Again, question 7 is, I knew Wally was going to get preaching. I knew this was going to be another Blame Barry episode. I still maintain that Barry is right. The SpeedForce can't die. Do you agree with that? Fabiello says, they play with energy as if it was a toy. It's a basic concept, though, an extra-dimensional power source. Plus, the SpeedForce is a pressure barrier between time and space, meaning that it has always been there, so it can't die. Just another excuse to blame it on Barry. Okay. And I'm going to say you deserve another hand clap for that answer. Brilliant. Because that is a brilliant answer. So, you know, again, if it's a barrier, and it's a barrier between time and space, and then the answer to my question is the Speed Force was born whenever time and space were born. How can something like that die? Polly says, I don't understand how what he did would kill off the Speed Force. I'm thoroughly confused on this. And I'm going to say, that's exactly my point. Nothing is really explained in a logical. I love black people! That's my cell phone. I need to shut that off. That was that was my cousin. That's exactly my point. Nothing is really explained in a logical manner in this episode. I don't understand how we're supposed to buy Speed Force dying either. And dying as Nora, no less. Not only did it die, but it died in the form of its manifestation as his mother. Which is my next question about Nora Allen. But again, I just don't believe it can die. I don't think it should die. Terrence Robinson, TJ Future CPA says, tricky question. If the Spectre's power on CW is enough to jumpstart a multiverse, I can see where it's powerful enough to harm, maybe kill a force. But what does that do to other forces' energies? I'm going to say, good point. It seems counterintuitive if that spectral energy was enough to reshape a multiverse, yet one of the elemental forces of that multiverse is corrupted and killed by it. Okay, so again, just not a logical in-story explanation. Okay, let's keep it moving. That was question 7. Moving on to question 8. Even if I buy the Spectre's energies being enough to corrupt and kill the Speed Force, which I don't, aren't we tired of Barry watching his mother die? That's another one that they keep going back to the well on. We understand in season 1 that was the whole driving force behind why Barry was doing what he was doing, because he was going to find his mother's killer. And I think it was beautiful and powerful, because remember that Barry's father also got framed for that murder. And I thought it was a powerful driving, motivating force for our main protagonist in the first season, maybe even in season 2. But now it seems to be a go-to setup that, you know, whenever we need to bum Barry out or blame him for something else, we're just going to have another version of Nora die. Really? So let me see what you guys say. Mauricio says, tired, at least in my case, I already gave up on seeing this boy crying for his dead mom. And I'm going to say, yes, he's done it over and over and over until now. Does it even have any emotional resonance left? Does it? Does Barry watching Nora die, his mom die, because he watched his daughter Nora die too, but his mother, Nora Allen, does Barry watching that happen have any more emotional resonance left to it, or have they wrung it, you know, like a wet dish rag, and so they squeeze all the water out of it and now it's dry? Because it kind of feels dry to me at this point. Polly's picking up what I'm saying. Polly says it's gotten to the point It's not even sad anymore. You can only weep the death of so many aunts until you're callous to the act. Not saying a person has so many aunts. Not saying a person has a life value of an aunt. Just saying. And I'm going to say, yes, like a wet dish rag that has been squeezed until every drop of water has left it. Kane Fabiolo says, I feel sorry for Barry. The entire show is based on seeing Barry suffer her death. I'm going to say, remember, they hate Barry just like they hated Oliver Queen. That's why the show is about making him and watching him suffer. Because they do. They hate Barry Allen the same way they hated Oliver. Because the show is all about Barry suffering and how many times he screwed up, no matter what. Emperor Maruda, Rob Crow says, yes, he overused this trope and why Spectre corrupt SpeedForce and anti-monitor who attacked Barry and her bionic appendix. Trek with 2Ks, 1-2 says, they went there again, and I'm going to say, yes, they did. And once again, Barry has to watch Nora die and feel like it's his fault. It was powerful the first 2 times. Now it's just annoying, which is a shame. It really is a shame that they've taken something that was once so powerful and once has such, emotional, an emotional impact on the audience, and have just worn it out, have used it so many times until we don't really care anymore. Okay. Let me point out that Cisco has once again, this is question 9, let me point out that Cisco has once again become a metaphor for the show itself. It and he are just traveling in circles without organic character progression. Can you see that? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Cisco, from the beginning, has pretty much been the audience voice. If there's any character that's been saying what we've been thinking, it's Cisco. And Cisco is also the fanboy voice, because he's the one that fanboys out. But now, just like he said in this episode, he did all those travels, all those journeys, he went all over the world, and he had no enlightenment, he had no epiphany, he had no breakthrough. He's in the same place as he was before. But that's an overall metaphor for the show itself, because the show just keeps traveling in circles. Who has grown or changed in a significant way? And how does the theme of let's beat up on Barry ever change in this show? Everything's always Barry's. It always comes back to that it's always Barry's fault. Okay, let me read your answers. Polly says yes. It's going in circles, not finding itself because it's not really going anywhere. I'm going to like Barry Allen, the show's main protagonist, has absolutely no character progression. None. So if the main character isn't growing or changing, what's the point? When you watch something like Breaking Bad, Walter White went from a mild-mannered chemistry teacher that was dying, that had a hidden dark side, to letting that dark side come forward and consume him, and becoming more and more evil and dangerous and murderous and destructive as the show went on. That's character progression, as opposed to what we see with Barry. Ryan Incoke says, I've seen this regarding the show since the beginning of season 3. I'm going to say, yes, Barry Allen stays the same every year, and self-blame is his go-to response to every single situation. Okay, that was question 9. Got to hurry up, got some more questions to go through. Question 10, because we're almost out of time. While in this episode was a walking infomercial for Zen Buddhism. Do you think faith and religious philosophy is tied to the Flash, or is it all supposed to be science-based? So this is kind of tied into what I said before. And I'm not saying there can't be room for both in superheroes, and I'm not saying there can't be room for both in this show, but it needs to be well done. It needs to be explained, okay, where we understand where science begins and ends and where faith or religious philosophies begin and end. Okay? Polly says, I really don't mind if someone finds a faith that makes them complete, but honestly, in a show like this, it doesn't need to be a walking ad. Finding center and self-worth is great and important, but if it's all you talk about, how centered are you really? Wally was more of a trope or a stereotype for someone that's found enlightenment. Because all people like that do is quote their religious leaders, which borders on cultism. Okay, when you see people that say they found enlightenment, but you know they don't have any normal elements to their lives anymore, just all they do is walk around and they're meditating or quoting whatever their religious texts are, and it's like they don't function in the real world anymore. That's borderline religious abuse and cultism, because spirituality should make you function better in the world you live in, not make you create a different one in your mind and disconnect from the real world. That's not healthy. JB, Mr. No Follower, says, side note, Wally has had a lot of character development. I appreciate it, and with just one episode appearance, it says a lot. And I'm going to say, I do agree with that. I just think it was overcooked, like burnt lasagna. And I'm going to say, Grok Comics says, as with all Arrowverse shows, it was overdone. As with all Arrowverse shows, it was overdone. And I'm going to give him a clap on that, because that's the truth. It was an element of the show, but they just hit it too hard over and over and over and over again. All right, let me move on to the next question so I can get done. If Mr. Gif here would posting very slowly. Okay. Question 11. What are the ramifications of Barry building his own SpeedForce, and does that mean he gets to decide who taps into it? He controls who becomes a speedster now. Okay, that was a major development at the end when Barry turns to his team and says, I want you to help me develop my own SpeedForce, my own artificial SpeedForce, because Thawne built a negative SpeedForce, so he's no longer tied into the SpeedForce. But Barry is now talking about building his own artificial SpeedForce, because if he doesn't, Barry and Wally, according to Thawne, only have a few weeks left to speed in their bodies. They have a residual charge, and then that charge is going to fade out and Barry's going to lose his speed forever, because now the SpeedForce is gone. It's just gone because it died. So now Barry's going to build his own. Well, that means then, if Barry builds his own, does he control it? Is Wally going to get to be able to tap into that speed? Does Barry get to decide that? What about other speedsters? Can they tap into it through a lightning and chemical accident like Barry, or can they fly into it like Savitar in the comics tried to do? Or is Barry going to control his own SpeedForce now, like Thawne gave his negative SpeedForce power to Nora? Can Barry give his SpeedForce powers to others? Because that's going to make Barry a bit of a god of the SpeedForce now. Does seem like this would be the fate. Polly says, honestly digging at how selfish Barry really is as a character. We've seen too much on this show. I'm going to say this basically makes him the god of his new SpeedForce, which is really scary. Again, what are the ramifications? What is that going to do to Barry? Now let me get this last question in, because we are almost under the gun here. Question 12. Welp, evil Mirror Iris has been found out by Camilla. How will Mirror Iris explain that? And is Camilla dead or in the mirror dimension? So Camilla looked at the photo she took of Iris and Wally with a different filter on and saw that Iris has a mirror-based reflection. It's not really Iris. So evil Iris was there and said, yep, I'm not Iris, and she zapped her with a gun. So is Camilla dead? Did she kill her? Or did she transport her into the mirror dimension? But either way, how is Iris going to explain Camilla's absence? Because isn't Cisco going to notice that his girlfriend's gone? What is Iris going to say? Is she going to make up something to say that she broke up with Cisco and left him and just left Team Citizen and just broke camp? If she says that, Cisco's probably going to investigate because Cisco is obsessive. So maybe that's how Cisco's going to find out that Iris is lying. I don't know. But anyway. Polly says, this is what I was wondering, because if she's bye-bye, then Iris is going to have a very angry or troopy by now sad Cisco to explain to. And I'm going to say, and he will investigate, because if Mirror Iris says that she broke up with him and just left town, Cisco will go to her apartment and see how true that is. Now, let me throw in, maybe that's how Cisco exposes Mirror Iris. Maybe it is. So maybe this is the trigger event that exposes Mirror Iris to Cisco. Okay, on my question before, Twilight's Inferno says, I think faith especially ties into the show, as it was founded on at least believing in the impossible and defying the odds. While science is the groundwork and needs to be treated with the importance it used to be, it's also, like I mentioned earlier, as the speedsters are religion. There's a lot of science in how it works, but it's almost treated as a gift from a higher power. Even Caitlin, master of the science of the SpeedForce, was one of the first to believe in the more mythic side in it choosing Barry. So a bit of both. And I'm going to say, yet another excellent answer. All right, that's it. 2 o'clock, that's it. Flash Chat is always the fastest hour live. This hour always flies by. Thank you so much to those of you that joined me live on Facebook Live. Thank you to those of you that participated in the Flash Chat on Twitter. Thank you for those of you that are listening to the podcast. So we will be back next week because there's a new episode of Flash on tonight. I don't know if they finished the season because remember the Flash has shut down production because of the beer bug. So I don't really know how many more episodes are left or if they finished out or what's going on. So we'll just do Flash Chat as long as new episodes are airing, okay? So I will see you same time next week for next episode of Flash Chat. Can I talk? Next episode of Flash Chat. Seems like I'm doing tongue-tied today. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Share, and ring the bell.